We're going to get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over right now to Chris Goff.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for showing up. I've actually taken a lot of heat over the last 2 weeks, but just to make it clear, drugs are going to be found in properties everywhere. It doesn't matter what neighborhood it is. It doesn't matter the price point, and I can assure you, drugs do not discriminate. So I think the big question is, what happens if you flip a house and you find drugs in the property? And that's really the whole lesson tonight. So we're glad that you can join us, as well as having one of my students on, Jim Shoemaker, that actually went through this. So it's going to be great to listen to the story. Hopefully you're going to pick up a ton of tips and some information. And I do see we have a lot of new people. Started part-time in 98 and full-time in 99. And, my dream job as a kid was to work on airplanes, and went to school, did all the right things, and got out of school and couldn't get a job. And I said, what am I going to do? So I went into the Air Force, and I became a crew chief for a fighter bomber plane in the Air Force. And after getting out of the Air Force, I finally landed that dream job working for United Airlines. And after about a year, although that was my dream job as a kid, it wasn't my dream salary as an adult. And I started looking into, what's this real estate investing stuff about? And went online, started Googling, and found Carlton Sheets. And I had bought his program. And that's kind of where everything kickstarted. I soon later quit my job. My mom freaked out. Here, had a great job, benefits, the whole 9 yards. And I just quit to do something that I really haven't done yet. But it was something in my heart, something that I just saw myself doing. And I saw other people doing it. So I knew that I could go do this. I couldn't be that dumb. And it took me about 3 months to do my first deal. After that, I did 46 by the end of my first year. And up to today, just over 500 deals, and a lot of creative financing deals along the way. I was never that person that just did one thing. I think, you have to have multiple profit centers coming in all the time, in case, one profit center isn't working one month, you've got another one that's coming through. And because of all that experience, I've been able to be a best-selling author now 3 times. The co-founder of the REI Pro software, where we have the other co-founder, Bo Manry, on. Been on pretty much every major network. And most recently, Bo and I, took the journey down of being an executive film producer. And it's pretty cool that we got to be a part of this whole Folds of Honor. And many of you probably saw it come out this past weekend. If you haven't, we definitely encourage you. And it's all about supporting all the families, from, the spouses, the children that kind of are forgotten after their spouses in the military have fallen. So we do help them provide scholarships so they can continue their education and so forth. So if you haven't checked it out, you could do so on Amazon Prime. We would love for you to check it out. And if it's in your heart to donate to the Folds of Honor, of course, we would love that too. It's something close to us. Also, we've got Mr. Jim Shoemaker on with us tonight, and he's going to walk us through this property, this deal that it's pretty cool. We've got the entire story. We have all the before pictures. We have the after shots, and I think you're going to learn a ton. So I want to welcome to this session, Jim Shoemaker.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. As he said, my name is Jim Shoemaker. I'm a native of the Phoenix area. Lived here all my life. Traditionally, I'm an IT professional and a small business owner. And I started doing real estate a little over 6 years ago, 2014. So really just got into it because I was looking for some other way to really break out of the 9 to 5 that I know many of us get stuck in. And this is kind of where it led me.
Where did you actually go first, Jim? Because, people will they'll go to Google, they'll go to YouTube, they'll hear their friends talk about it. Kind of where did you go to say, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so I I started learning about it actually as I was, working in IT. I had a 45-minute commute to and from work every day, and so I started downloading podcasts. Actually, I started listening to different podcasts that talked about, how to do. Most of them were primarily around wholesaling, but that's what really kind of, gave me the bug, so to speak, to get into real estate. Got me excited about it. So after that, there was some, online training that I did, and then, as you mentioned earlier, I, became one of your coaching students, and that really expanded my view on a lot of things, because before that I thought, well, there's one way to do real estate, and I learned that, oh no, there's more like a dozen different ways to do real estate. So, um, that's really how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, I think, when people, it's like, I made mistakes for like 7 years straight, but that's how you learn. And I always looked at today is so different than when I got started. And we're really just not in the time to fail, I think is
Mm.
the key. And I think, having that person with you just to, like you said, expand your knowledge into this business. People really just don't realize what takes place in like just a general coaching session of information. It's so funny when I talk to my students, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you told me that, because I wouldn't have ever have thought that. I wouldn't have asked that question. I wouldn't have looked at it that way. I didn't really understand it. And I think that's where the experience comes in. And now you've been in, 6 years now, and every deal you do is just adding on to that experience to really help you in that next one. I always looked at, those things as just a driving force and knowledge to stay in that fight and just keep working myself to death to try to make it perfect every time, even though I knew we would never be perfect. You just try to, and you learn from your mistakes that way. So, you ready to talk about this deal?
Absolutely.
All right. So, what we're going to do is I just kind of labeled this as the beginning, So I'm going to show you the property. It's actually a condo. And, a lot of people have asked me, Jim, are condos good to invest in? I said, well, pretty much anything is good to invest in as long as the numbers come out right, So fall in love with numbers, not houses. But kind of walk us through, how did you find this deal? How did that whole initial conversation go? And what was the situation with the owner on this?
Yeah, so I found this property. It was actually through one of my direct mail marketing campaigns, and it was one of my earliest campaigns when I got started. But I actually didn't hear from the owner for, it was about 6 months afterwards when she finally called me. She was an older woman who lived in northern Arizona, and this was in Phoenix, which, it's not where she was at, and it was an inherited property. She had gotten it from her parents, along with a couple of her siblings, and she was, in a word, just completely frustrated with it. She had her son and a nephew that had been staying in it, and it was one of those situations where they were allowed to stay there as long as they took care of it, and they just clearly were not taking care of it. She had been getting calls and letters from the HOA where, violation after violation, because they were, one rule or another, they just, weren't doing what they needed to be doing, and had just had enough. And so she was really just looking for a way out, because, she owed the HOA a bunch of money. They were actually in foreclosure from the HOA when she called me. There was still a mortgage on it that, she inherited with the property, and it was just beyond what she could take care of. So she reached out to me, and we just kind of went from there. She gave me a little bit of a heads up before I went over there that, the place really wasn't taken care of, and there was, there'd be some challenges with it. But as you're well aware, when I got there, it was a lot more than what I was expecting. So
I
Uh,
always used to say, when I walk in a property, like I want to smell cat urine, because I always feel I'm going to get a better deal. I wanted a wreck,
uh,
and yeah, this property definitely was. We have some pictures of this property too. So, and I think, a couple of things you mentioned, she had a lot of different situations going on.
mhm.
And so the motivation level was just really there. Did she ever, did she ever tell you why she waited like so long, from contacting you or?
Um, I, I think it was one of those things where she was trying to get them to do the right thing and take care of it. And, it finally got to the point where I think she just realized that that wasn't going to happen. And she had kept my letter. She said that she actually had it on top of her refrigerator. And, she had to go look for it, but she did. I'm glad she did. But, she was trying to get it to work out with them, but they just weren't taking it seriously.
I couldn't tell you how many deals I've done where, people always ask, well, how many mailers do you well, I keep sending them until somebody says, stop sending me a mailer.
Hmm.
And how many people have actually 3, 6 months, 9 months later actually contact you? And I think it's that you got to be, have that repetition. It's funny. She kept it on, on her refrigerator. She's like, I'm going to call this guy when I get desperate enough, I think is probably what it was.
And
But
we tell people that all the time to send out that direct mail because, and especially with the postcards, they keep it. It's flashy and they do call back. We've had it happen to us.
that's true. All right. So let's kind of walk people through maybe some of the pictures of, when we first get here to the property.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to just put up a few pictures here, Jim, and just got to tell everyone, what was the situation like when you show up? Because this could be especially if this is your first time looking at a property, this could be like a little maybe intimidating. What were you thinking as you were coming through here for the first time?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this was the first deal that I'd done. I was just starting out, and so I walk into this place, and well, first as I pull up outside, the picture on the right, that's actually one of the two patios, and I could see some of the stuff sticking up over the patio, but I couldn't really tell what it was. But I go inside, and the picture on the left is what is supposed to be the dining room. It's one of those old late 70s, early 80s dining room with the mirror behind it. And it was like a storage room, and it got worse from there. Um, the picture in the center, as you can probably tell, is the kitchen. That's just one side of it. The other side didn't look much better. And the whole place looked like a giant storage room. It was clearly they had a hoarding problem. Um, and there were dirty dishes all over. There were boxes of stuff all over. There was probably twice as much furniture in the place that should have been for a two-bedroom condo. And then it progressively got worse from there. The picture on the right, it had two patios, and the patios were so full of just junk that you literally could not walk out on one of them. The other one, you had about a 3 foot by 2 foot space that you could stand, but that was it. And on top of that, I mean, the condition of the condo itself was just a disaster. Um,
Right.
I remember sending you one video, which we don't have up here because I don't think it'll play video, but I walked into one of the bathrooms and the water was just running in the sink. They could not shut it off. The pipe was broken, and it was just a constant stream of water that was just going down the drain. It never stopped. And
Hmm.
I remember looking at this going, what in the world, how do you live in a place like this? Uh,
Real quick, Jim, just before I forget, because one tip that it took several of these properties for me to actually comprehend this one point. But a tip for everybody watching is when you go through a property like this and you know that the owner doesn't live there, I send the owner like these pictures because it's like, hey, here's what your property looks like.
yeah,
And of course, I always take the ones that are bad, right? So they kind of remind me of just sharing that little tip with everyone that send these pictures and say, look, here's the condition of the property. And that will sometimes help justify that offer that you're going to make.
sure.
Let me show just a few more here. And we're going to, I think we got 4 here. So, kind of take us to the left here. And one thing that I noticed with this that we were talking about are all these X's, and there were numerous pictures with these just red X's everywhere in this property. And I love your response to this. I just wanted you to kind of share with everybody what's going on here.
Yeah, so the red X's and honestly several of the holes in the wall. So one of the individuals living there, which was the owner's son, was actually suffered from schizophrenia. And his nephew that lived with him was supposed to be caring for him, which wasn't happening. And so in the room that belonged to her son, there was probably a dozen or so of these red X's and different paraphernalia just spray painted on the wall. I mean, it looked like what you'd expect in a gang alley somewhere. That's about what that looked like.
Yeah. And wait, what were you thinking? Like, this is your first house, and like, I mean, that make you nervous or what?
It really did. When I'm walking through here, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how long do I have to stay here without appearing like this is scaring me? And then I can just get out.
Right.
That was my thought. But yeah, I just going through, these are the pictures I was taking. And honestly, at this point in my mind, it scared me a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I love the bathroom shot with the yellow all over. Can you tell everybody what in the world that is?
That is spray paint. From what I was told, and that's just part of the bathroom, literally the entire inside of the bathroom was covered with this. The gentleman who was living there was trying to do something with it. I don't know if he was trying to light it on fire or what, but the can of spray paint literally exploded in the bathroom. And so it was all over the shower. It was all over the tub. The top of the toilet was covered with it. It was on the floor, the walls. I mean, it looked like you set a 4-year-old in there with yellow paint and said, yeah, have fun. I mean, that's what it looked like.
Right. And the far right picture, what is that? What's going on here?
The far right picture, that's the dishwasher, and really just, so you can see the damage to the counters, which was throughout most of the kitchen, and the bathroom vanities as well.
Right.
It was pretty rough.
So we go through this property, and you put it under contract for 41 grand, right? So
yes.
Of course, she had a mortgage still on the property. There's numerous issues. There's HOA. What made you want to buy this property?
Well, to be honest, at first I didn't.
What was your first reaction? Would you just jump in this going, oh man, I see a home run here? I mean, I see a home run, but
yeah,
what was your first thought?
I mean, I was new. I didn't know any better. I mean, my first reaction walking out of there was, there's no way I'm going anywhere near this property. And, as you know, I sent you the pictures, and you're like, well, let me take a look at them. And so I left, and, driving down the road 10 minutes later, Chris calls me back. He's like, you're buying that property. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's like, yes, you are. And
it's funny you said that, because on my very first deal with Chris as my coach way back in the day, I said the same thing. I said, I am not buying this house. He said, oh, yes, you are. And I made good money on that house. So that's why it pays to have somebody to kind of watch over that shoulder there.
And I'll tell you when not to. I'm known to walk away from a deal. I think that's just the experience. And I know it's hard for, if you're just getting started, because I freaked out when I looked at properties, that were really just trashed. And I guess you really just have to look at the numbers and look past that. Like, what would it look like if it were fixed up? And Jim, this was in a nice neighborhood, right?
Absolutely. This was less than a mile from one of the prestige resorts in Phoenix. It's in a neighborhood that is very well known for retirement condos and rental condos and that sort of thing. So yeah, this it's not like this was South Phoenix. This was up in the Cave Creek area, and it was a better area.
And I remember, when you were taking me to the property, that I was like, wow, this is a good area. I mean, I was like, made me even feel better, that because I look at how fast can we sell it,
Right.
And I think every time we make an offer, I'm always thinking, how quickly can I get rid of it? And you know, it was good to see all the different areas around this property that I could see people would want to buy this in a heartbeat very quickly. Even if
Yep.
it were an investor, I could see people wanting to live here. And those are always good rehab properties. And that's how I look at it. If I'm going to rehab it myself, I needed to have what I call a C neighborhood, which is right there in that kind of that middle price range neighborhood. And this kind of fell right in from a condo point of view anyways. So,
Yep.
All right. So tell me what this is, you know, like what is this picture here?
This was during your visit, as you remember, and we were in the process of cleaning all the junk out of the condo, and actually went to move a bookcase that was literally sitting in the middle of the floor. And as I moved it, this fell off the top of the bookcase.
Nice.
Two needles and, you know, a spoon that clearly has been used for some self-manufacturing.
Correct. What were your thoughts? What were you thinking when that happened? I can't remember.
Well, I don't know what I said, but I was thinking I was going to strangle you. That's what I was thinking. But,
Right. I'm getting back on a plane tonight, going home.
What did I buy?
I mean, my first thought beyond that was, what else am I going to find? And because, you know, you run into this kind of situation, it's like, oh, great, now what? You know, what else is in here?
Oh, I mean, you know, I'll just let people know, 3 rehabs ago, we found a gun. And the very first thing we did was called the police. And the police came by. The very next house we bought, right across the street from that, there were drugs in the attic. So you're going to find this stuff. And, you know, and that's why I wanted to put this presentation together for people, because whoever talks about it, I mean, you're going to find this stuff in every kind of property in the U.S. and every kind of neighborhood. And, you know, in asking Jim if he would come on here, I wanted to also give everybody some tips real quick, Jim, before we continue here. This is, I don't know if people know this, but one of the top reasons for lawsuits in real estate industry is disclosure issues. And that's why I'm always like, no, just disclose everything. These laws are going to be different in different states, but I want to just kind of talk about specific to this kind of stuff. So in about half the states in the U.S., sellers are bound to disclose whether a property has been used as a meth lab, not that this particular property was, but and or where there's a risk of meth exposure. Selling a property that's been used for cultivation, manufacturing, or distribution of marijuana also requires disclosure if the real estate agent or broker is aware of the activity. Of course, if you're not aware of it, you're not aware of it, so you wouldn't disclose it. But I think it's, you know, it's got to be hard for people, Jim, that, you know, if you think about buying a property and you become aware that there are, you know, we'll say illegal items left behind, you know, how many investors would generally just tell the realtor that? Because now the realtor is going to be bound to, you know, disclose that as well. So you're supposed to disclose it. Now they have to disclose it. And it does kind of put everybody in a awkward situation, because you have to look at the buyer's point of view of like, I'm not buying that. I don't care if you remodeled it or not. I'm not buying it whatsoever. Sure. So a couple of signs that I want you to look for. So if you go through a property, just number one, just some strong odors of the property. You know, I always tell people, you know, you need to use all of your senses. When I go and inspect a property, which is step 3 of our executable steps, is I always tell people, get out of the car and I want you to listen. I want you to listen for that train. I want you to, are there kids playing down the street? I just want you to listen and start using your senses. And odors, obviously, like I said, I want to smell that cat urine, you know, because I'm going to get a better deal. But you know, look out for the strong odor. Sometimes it's not a big deal, but just a tip here: evidence of excessive use of chemicals, fire damage. You know, a lot of times these properties are likely to catch on fire. So I usually, this is just me, Chris Goff speaking, but I usually stay away from properties that have fire damage. I almost did my first one and I'm glad I backed out. Just obviously check the wall carpet, hydroponic setup inside the home, disconnected fire smoke detectors. Like that tip right there, like people wouldn't even pay attention to that. Like you're going through and you're like, you have holes in the wall, you're looking at, I would say big items, but if you walk in and you start to sense this stuff, go check the smoke detectors because that's the first thing that they're going to disconnect. In covered windows, I couldn't tell you how many times that the windows are covered in these properties. So just a few tips there. The EPA actually has a guide. It's a free guide online. I definitely encourage everybody. I know that link is kind of it's kind of long, but just Google it. And it's called the Voluntary Guidelines for, and I'm just using one drug here because there's all kinds of drugs, but just as an example, you can get a free guide on how do you actually clean it up? How much volume do you have to have? What are the prior, the steps of, just legal steps that I have to take as an investor when you do run into a property like this. So definitely go check that out. And I'm just I want to build awareness for people that you're going to eventually run into a property that has drugs in it or something illegal.
Yeah, and Jim, just to clarify, you didn't know that this had drugs in it when you bought it. You were moving that bookcase, right? Because we didn't know there was a gun in the house. And we didn't know there was marijuana in the attic either, in the ones we were doing. So I'm just clarifying that's what that was. I remember you saying that.
Absolutely, yeah. It was after we bought the place.
Surprise!
Yeah,
that's what I say.
Yeah, these are those situations that we're talking about you're going to encounter as you do these things.
That's why I always build in what I call a hedge expense. So whatever your repair cost is, I want you to add 10% of whatever that repair cost is as a buffer for things that, you don't see. Just 10 steps real quick. Inspect the property, surrounding area, ventilate the property, clean. Obviously, you got to have a game plan for it, depending on what is there and so forth. Remove the objects. And again, appropriately and legally, as I mentioned with the gun, we called the police and they showed up. So vacuum the floors, walls, wash with detergent, not bleach, because depending on the kind of drug, it could have a reaction to bleach. And that's probably a really good tip. A lot of people may not know, I love bleach. Like I'll bleach my baseboards, and trust me, I've been doing it for about 2 months now. Bo would know that. But you got to be careful with, bleach in general. Clean the HVAC system, clean and wash again, like go back and double clean it. Inspect the plumbing and septic. And there's what's called a clearance level testing, depending on the level of drugs. If you just find something small, that's one thing, but I'm talking more bigger things and a lot of it. So we'll get back to the story here. So you buy this property. I always say we, because always as a coaching student, it feels like we're doing it together. But you bought this property, and tell me, what do we do now? So we've kind of gone in and said, okay, how are we going to fix this up? Do we even know of a contractor? Kind of walk us through. Now we're in this middle process now.
Sure, yeah. So the short answer was we did everything. We essentially gutted the condo. It was one thing after another. Everything from the full kitchen to the full bathrooms. So these pictures that you're bringing up here, the picture on the left, that is the living room, and it had those lovely, like 5-inch square white adobe tiles throughout most of the place, that we decided we're just going to take that out. And, we went with the stained concrete flooring, which looked great. We'll see pictures of that. The picture in the center and on the right, that is the kitchen area after everything is pulled out. So you can see, the white areas are where the cabinets and stuff were. We just ended up gutting everything out because there was nothing in there that was really worth saving. And if I remember correctly, we even pulled the light fixtures out and put in a different type of light fixture overhead just to kind of update it. Again, this was a nicer area. This wasn't a budget condo. So we really put the extra into it. And I was really just fortunate at the time that the contractor that I was working with was one that specialized in disaster cleanup. So like the fire cleanup, water cleanup, mold, that kind of stuff. And one of the things that they did, well, it wasn't necessarily needed what would have been drug cleanup if there was something like that. So, when I told him about it, he was like, "Is that all you found?" I'm like, "That's it." He's like, "Okay, good. I don't want to hear any more about it." But yeah, so these two pictures here are the kitchen. The picture on the left is, the living room after they chipped up all the tiles as they were cleaning it out. So
Yeah, and that's a lot of work. People may not know how much work that is to actually remove the tile, because then you got to put something and do something with it. And
yeah.
but I love stained concrete, and
Yeah.
we've done it. I love doing it when it's appropriate. And
Mhm.
like you said, this condo was in a fairly decent area. The one thing that I always hate about the white tiled floors is it feels like you walk into a hospital,
Mhm.
and it really needs something. A lot of people go with the hardwoods, but again, we're in Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different marketplace, where if you were in the north, you might go with some more hardwoods and so forth. But I do love we're going to see pictures of it, but I've got a couple more here that I want to show everybody how you really just gutted this thing.
Yeah, so the picture on the left and the picture in the center, those are the two vanity spaces, because this was essentially a dual master. So, this is after everything's ripped out. They had to redo some of the plumbing on one of them. The other one, it seemed like it was okay. I mean, literally, except for one bathtub in one of the bathrooms, the one that wasn't covered in yellow spray paint, um, everything came out. The other bathtub came out, all the vanities, the entire kitchen, everything came out.
That's
Uh,
kind of the good thing about a small condo is, it's easy to get rid of everything and just start from scratch versus, a 4,000 square foot home.
yeah,
And so you can get in and get out of these deals.
yeah. And then, additional stuff that we ended up doing on this, some I expected, some I didn't. The sliding glass doors had to be completely replaced. And they ended up costing more than I expected, because come to find out there was an HOA rule that they had to be a very specific design of door that made them 3 times as much from a cost standpoint as what I would have put in there. Um, we replaced the entire HVAC unit, the water heater. Um, I mean, literally, I think the studs and that one bathtub were the only thing we didn't touch.
Right. All right. So we'll kind of shift to the end, kind of look at, the final product here. And you're going to see, a big difference. Number one, not a great picture. I wish we had some more light, but we have some more pictures of this floor, because to me, the floor was the sales piece to it.
Yeah.
When you walk in, you walk on these beautiful floors. It's a great sales tool, especially in a nicer area.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at a few pictures here on just the cleanliness. Is that your contractor there in that picture?
That's my contractor. Yeah, she keeps me busy. Yeah, no, that's my daughter Kirsten. She's 6 now, but at the time she was a little shorter than that.
So I mean, it's clean. I think
Yeah.
It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, I want properties to be clean.
Yeah.
It's got to smell clean. It's got to look clean. It's got to feel clean. And I know that's exactly what you did here, is made it really clean here. We'll show some more pictures here. Now, who helped you, like, with just some of the design ideas? Like, how did you know, like, hey, I want to put these cabinets, I want this granite, I want this color paint? I mean, this is your first deal. Normally, I don't even recommend anybody doing a rehab on their first deal. Obviously, you have some help here, but how did you make all those decisions? What was going through your mind?
Well, so I had a couple of different uh, individuals who were helping me from a design standpoint. My contractor had some input. Like the photo on the right, you can see the shelves there. He actually built those in.
That was a great idea, by the way.
Yeah, that used to be a cabinet with doors on it, and both bedrooms he built in the shelvings like that, which really opened it up. Um, as far as like the granite choices, a lot of that, I had a friend of mine who had done some interior design, and so she recommended as far as like patterns and stuff. But we were really just going for that, not over the top, because I mean, this isn't $1 million neighborhood, but we wanted it to look like something that you could turn into a high-end rental, or someplace. Like I said, there were quite a few retirees in this community, so we wanted something that was easy to take care of, easy to clean. That's why we went with the stainless and the granite, just to make it look modern, but not over rehabbed, so to speak.
Right.
Um,
And I can tell you, we have over rehabbed a couple of properties.
it's easy to do if you're not careful.
Never.
So, it's funny. Sunny, when she goes into design, she always says, you try to bring out the best of each and every house. And every house is different. There's obviously some similarities of things that you would do, but you try to, just those built-ins. I mean, that was a great idea. It just creates not just the space, but the visual look of those. And, I can kind of see them in the left picture here. It just makes it feel different. I always say, the fastest way to sell something is to get somebody to feel it.
Mhm.
That's how you market the property. But
Definitely
I mean,
interesting.
looks good.
Yep.
All right. So and I know a lot of people are probably going to ask Jim. So I'll just ask you now, from, the time that you started this project to the end, what kind of time frame, because you're working full time, right? So
Yeah. So I'm working full time while doing this, and because of some of the things that we ran into, it took a little longer than I expected. But if I'm looking at my sheet here, the entire process from the time that we closed on the property, the cleanup, the rehab, everything took about 2.5 months. Some of that, there was a little bit where we were waiting on specific subcontractors and really just kind of lining everything up. But overall, it for what we had to do, it went pretty smoothly.
well, you think about this is your first deal.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like your 100th house you've done where you just go in, you just knock it out, and you're good to go because you already know. This was a learning process at the same time. So you're working at it and learning what to do at the same time. And sometimes that could feel overwhelming for a lot of people that are getting started, that they have to learn it and work it at the same time. So just again, I think that was one of the best shots that I found as far as the floor, but the floors were pretty cool. Love the look of it. And there's the hot water here, and then just the screenshot, just looking outside the property there. It's a nice area.
You can tell that's a nice area. It's not in a war zone or anything.
Right.
Well, someone's paying the HOA because the grass is cut. So
Yeah.
So Jim, just kind of how did you settle the HOA? I mean, what was the problems, and can you just talk just maybe for a minute or two on that HOA process?
Yeah. So when I went to talk with the HOA, because the owner had provided me her most recent ledger, and it was like over $8,500 in fines, and it was just missed payments and then fined for this, and a lot of it had to do with noise complaints, and a lot of it had to do with all the trash and junk that was on the patios, because the noise complaints were, the neighbors were complaining because the guy that was living here would go and dumpster dive at 3 o'clock in the morning and then come home and try to take it all apart and everything else, and that was his idea of working. And so you can imagine that made a lot. I mean, I think I told you this, but when I first went and closed on the property, and I was walking around and talking to some of the neighbors, and they learned that I was buying the place, they were elated.
Yeah.
Because they were like, does that mean they're leaving? I'm like, oh yeah, they're already out. One woman hugged me because she just was done with them.
Right.
But yeah, so I went and talked to the HOA, and the HOA, they'd already started foreclosure proceedings. When I told them that, I was buying it and I was planning to rehab it, they're like, okay, great. They're like, when are you closing? What can we do? They, I tried to negotiate with them a little bit as far as adjusting some of the fines, but unfortunately, it had gotten to the point that their lawyers were already involved and there were suits that had already been filed, so they really couldn't do a whole lot. But, going back to your point earlier about getting it at the right price, that just helped me negotiate the right price with the owner as well. It
Right.
was easy to just go back to her and go, yeah, we're going to have to take care of this. And so, that helped the negotiation quite a
Well,
bit.
that's where that hedge expense comes in too, because you're going to run into
Yeah,
these things that are just unknown.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's look at these numbers, because at the end of the day, that's what's important. I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we can't lose money on a
right.
deal. So total purchase price, and this obviously included closing costs 43, because you had mentioned we put it under contract at 41.
Right.
Got the property closed. Total cost, hold and rehab at 45. Proceeds after closing there, they was almost 112,000. So that left you a net profit there of $23,000.
Hmm.
Not bad. I mean, your first deal, and keep in mind, this was a $41,000 house you put under contract. And yeah, it
Right.
needs work, but you obviously, got a pretty good return on this. But, I love what you wrote here, lessons learned priceless, because, there's a lot of things that I'm assuming that you've learned just even from who you are, just your experience in this, how did it change you to, I know it changed me. What I always told people, when I did my first deal, I made $4,000. And when I made that $4,000, of course I was hooked, but I looked at life differently. Like, I started to see more opportunities out there, where I think a lot of us, we have just these blindfolds on, and we really don't see the opportunities. And I think as you build more experience, you see more opportunities. It's, wait, the houses are there. These people are in this situation, because how many people did you really help in this process? If we look at, the owner just struggling, she couldn't do anything. She wasn't in a financial position to do anything. She was elderly. The house was passed on to her. You look at the HOA, you look at, the issues they were having. The bank got paid off that she had a loan with. You had contractors in there that helped put, food on their table as well. And then in turn, who did you sell the property to?
So my buyer that ended up selling it to was actually another investor.
Right.
They came in and they bought it and they turned it into a rental, and they didn't have to do anything to it.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, where your exit strategy was, hey, I'm going to put some money into it. It's my first, I need my money back.
Sure.
Where another investor looks at it and go, hey, I could rent that out, cash flow. I'm going to hold on to that long term.
Hmm.
So I think we all have different goals in this business. And I think that's what makes it all work, is we just kind of working together to do deals. Because, last time I checked, they don't make any more land. So real estate is always going to be one of those businesses that is needed. And that's what I love
Yeah,
about it. And obviously the times we're in today are a little bit different. But the situations they're just more of them today. And
absolutely.
that's where you have to take the blindfolders off and start seeing these opportunities, as we call it. So I want to just go through one thing, and I want you to share with everybody just some lessons maybe you've learned. Those of you that are just getting started or looking at that first property, what could you pass on to other people?
So, I mean, the biggest lesson that I learned specifically from this property was getting over the fear. You mentioned you made $4,000 on your first property. When I bought this, I was just hoping not to lose money because I thought it was just terrible. Um, you know, Getting into it, learning the process, learning how it all works, and as you mentioned earlier, looking past what it looks like now and seeing what it will look like when you're done. That is, that's not something you're necessarily going to learn just by watching a video or, looking at pictures. It's really something you gotta jump in and do it. You have to be smart about it. You have to make sure that you get it at the right price, make sure your numbers are right, make sure it actually is a deal. You don't want to force it because that usually doesn't work out well. But really, you just have to take that first step, get in there, and you learn it as you go, and you're always learning something.
All of us, learning never ends. And, they always say the more you realize, or the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. Mm-hmm. So you keep learning, and that's a sign of intelligence. So, we're going to keep learning in life, and to get to whatever that goal is that, people want in their life. And I can tell you, it's definitely changed my goals. At first I was just like, oh, I just need to get a deal. I just need to make money. I got to pay my bills. And that turned into, hey, I want to grow. I want to have multiple offices. Now I want to, put this stuff on paper because I have so many people asking me. My goals changed over the last 20 years, and it's okay. It's okay that your goals change. It's just like you say, you got to get into the game. You got to get, you got to be in that fight and get out there and just start doing it, because you're never going to be perfect at it, right. But you will never have the opportunity to be perfect at it if you never start. And
Chris, didn't mean to interrupt you there. I mean, that is so true. Cause I tell you, several times how I just go meet that same guy at that same meetup club, back in the day. And it's just 3 years later. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you again. And he's like, I'm still working on that first deal. He never could pull that trigger. But man, he sure does come and talk about it a lot. And he's really interested in real estate. But if you don't get off the couch and go do it and get past that fear factor, you'll never get that deal done.
Right. Before we take some questions, Bo, right? We have time to take some questions. And I know we have condensed time with Jim this evening, but those of you just getting started, obviously a great tool. Hear from, if you're just getting started, it's a phenomenal tool. Yeah. If you're more of an experienced investor, you realize it's a must needed tool. So it works for everybody. And Bo, if you want to just kind of mention a couple of things here.
Yeah. And I've recognized some of the people on here that are part of the REI Pro family already. And, thanks for joining, but I also see a lot of people that are not. So for those of you who are not familiar with REI Pro, it's really that tool that we like to say it's all in one. It's everything from a full CRM to lead generation, finding deals like this, being able to look up vacants and absentee owners and pre-foreclosure homes. So definitely got the lead generation. It's got that built-in direct mail. It's interesting, Jim, you said, you found this off of a direct mail piece. So all that's already built in. If you need to take these marketing campaigns and bulk skip trace them, find contacts, cell phone numbers, nearest relatives, those things, all that's built in. Another cool feature is MLS comps. We have MLS comps on all 50 states. And for those of you in non-disclosure states like Texas, that's very important. You don't have to call your realtor anymore and find out what did the house sell for, because you can't even go to Zillow to get that, but you can in REI Pro, and we have the right to show that kind of stuff. But it's just an all-inclusive thing, from deal analyzers, how to structure these offers, a workflow system. So like Chris said, if you're first getting started, those 10 executable steps, we call it, it's about what knowing to do next to get through this whole hurdle of the actual deal. And we built it from the ground up that way to help anybody that's really getting started. But live trainings like this, we'd have ongoing education. We'd like to kind of educate our REI Pro family. We always call it a family. And so, hopefully you guys will join that family. You get a 14-day free trial. Go out there. You have nothing to lose. And I think it's a tool that's really just going to be, your most valuable employee, so to speak, in your business. So go out and give it a shot. It's a free 14-day trial.
Yeah. And if you don't know, that was our advertising 60 seconds right there.
There
But definitely want to shout out to, I think I just lost it. Let me get that back real quick. There we go. I'm going a little too fast there for you, Jim. Just thanks for taking the time, to share this information. And I know people are going to have questions, and I think that's important as well. But also, you're still doing deals, and if you're in the Phoenix area, what a great person to come in contact with. That if you have a property you're looking to sell, if you are maybe a private lender looking to work with, an educated investor, give Jim a call. Here's his contact information. He is not shy. He's a great guy. And I always say you always want to work with people with a great heart. And Jim definitely has that great heart. So Jim, if you just want to kind of say what you do, what you're looking for, or anything else, and then we'll get into the questions.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I mean, just about everything. I mean, as obviously rehab deals. I also do lease option or lease to own deals. And also, owner finance. As far as working with other investors, absolutely. Whether that's, someone that's looking to do a joint venture deal or someone who's looking to invest hands off. I've worked with other folks in the past where, they've got the money, but they just don't have the time. They don't have, they don't want to get their hands dirty with it, but they still want to make money. Great. Because as an investor, I love working with people like that. So,
Awesome.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, Bo, we ready for some questions?
Yep. And if you guys got any questions about the rehab, you got questions about the software, anything else, go ahead and start typing it now. So the first question coming in from George says, when pre-screening a seller for a lease option, do we inquire about the mortgage balance and the monthly payments, or just go by what is shown in the REI Pro platform?
Yeah, so it's in my script. And I know a lot of people kind of struggle with saying, okay, so how much do you owe on this property? And that's hard for some sellers would be like, I ain't giving you that information. So it's usually, I say it like, hey, do you know about how much you owe on that? That helps me understand, somewhere in the offers, because I can, generate multiple offers. I can even pay up to full price. So just want to make sure that we're in line with that. As soon as I talk about full price, because we're talking about a lease option, that's one way. But you know what? At the end of the day, just look at REI Pro. As long as we have the information, it's going to give you enough information to have an idea and a ballpark number. And sometimes I'll even ask the seller, so, what would you look to, what are you looking to get for this property? And if we did something creative, how much a month would you need? So I would, for beginners, I would just skip that part and just look at REI Pro. If you're more experienced, usually we could say it in a way that doesn't come across the wrong way. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. Question from Cordell. How would you present an offer to an out-of-state owner of a dilapidated, nearly condemned by the city property that says, quote, sale would be subject to a first mortgage?
Well, be hard to get a mortgage on that particular property,
Yeah.
number one. So I would definitely want to wholesale this to an investor based on how that was labeled. But, the important part of that question, I think, is how do you make an offer to somebody that's out of state? It's not like you can meet them at the property. One thing with a property that's really distressed is I would send some of those distressed pictures with the offer. It's a friendly reminder of what a piece of crap you have, right? And what it does, it's a pain for the person that owns the property, because either, why is it in that condition to begin with? Number one, they don't have money, they don't have time, that it's a burden to them. When you have problems, you try to not think about the problems because they're problems and you don't want to think about it. It's like the people that worry about making money, that they never can make any money because they're too worried about making money. It's that same kind of mental thing. So obviously the offer is going to be done either through email, but I like to follow up with a phone call for questions and stuff like that. Also, just straight phone call to make the offer. And, generally I'll say something, based on the current condition of the property, as It's on the verge of being condemned, which is not a good thing. And I don't even know if that's a good thing for me. So I would like to expedite this, but based on the time, the cost, and me dealing with the city, I'm going to have to offer you this much. And it's sometimes you're just trying to justify or draw the conclusion out in the offer when you make it. That was your cue to move on. Oh, I lost Bo.
Can't hear you, Bo.
Yourself.
Okay, I unmuted myself. I pulled a
See,
Chris.
I did it once. You did it. Now it's Jim's turn. So,
Well, I heard a bunch of thunder behind me. I was like, oh, let me mute that for a second. Okay, Cal says, hello. Great work on this condo. It looks amazing. You mentioned the deal was found through your mailers. 2 questions on this. Number 1, did you plan to do a rehab or were you going to wholesale it? Number 2, what kind of list did you pull it from? Was it pre-foreclosure? So the first one, did you plan to do this rehab or were you thinking you were going to just wholesale it initially?
So so it's a great question. This property in particular, once I saw it, once Chris talked me into buying it, I mean, the plan was to rehab it. The initial mailing, as I mentioned, I'd listened to a number of podcasts previously that talk about wholesaling and stuff, and that was probably the target from a marketing standpoint. So had I not been working with Chris, I probably would have just tried to wholesale it, just because at the time I was like, oh my God, this is a lot more than I really wanted to do. But once we got in there, once we made the evaluation, the rehab was the plan with it. As far as the list, so I don't remember specifically what list this came off of, but I know at the time the lists that I were targeting were out of area owners. As I mentioned, the owner actually lived in northern Arizona. She was up in the Flagstaff area. I was also just targeting the lower price properties because at the time, in my mind, that was the right thing to do. Lower price, less risk, which I know now isn't necessarily true. But I believe it came off of a out of area list, or what many see as like out of state owners, that kind of thing. So I believe that's where it came from.
yeah, remember, he didn't even want to buy the house.
I know you had to talk him into buying, but did it not give you that confidence knowing that Chris was there walking through this thing step by step with you?
Yep.
I mean, it did for me, when I first did it. Okay, let's see. Daryl wants to know if there's any way to disable any of the 10-step sections in the REI Pro software so that I can control what my virtual assistants can see. Daryl, that's a good suggestion. Right now, today, no, but if you don't mind, pop that into the support ticket section over there. Me and Chris go through these regularly, and we start looking, hey, is this something we can add to the software that will benefit everybody? And this is how we improve the software. So great suggestion.
Yeah, and just so people know, Bo and I actually work this at least 10 hours a day. And a lot of times on the weekends.
Are you taking a nap or something?
Who?
10 hours a day. I thought it was 15.
Well, you might be 14 sometimes. But so we're actively involved in this. This is not something we pass the buck on to other people, just as much as the education that we're providing now on a weekly basis through REI Pro. So we do see those. When Bo says, hey, we review these, we personally review those. We are the decision makers on those. So we definitely encourage, people to send in any kind of suggestions. And look, at the end of the day, our goal is to make this thing awesome. We want to make this great for everybody. And, we work very hard to accomplish that. As we're getting older, and it seems like, we should be working less, but it's a passion of ours. We love it. And so, and that's the thing I think a lot of people wouldn't understand until, you get to that point and you've built something over, many years. This was not something just yesterday. This was years of hard work. So please send any ideas over, or thoughts, suggestions, and everything else.
Yep. And this is really not a question. It's more of a comment that came in from Mario. And I like these comments when they come in, and I like to share them because it really shows that there are people out there doing the business. And for people who are just getting started and hadn't done a deal and maybe struggling finding it, there are people that, there are people out here doing it. So I just want to, say that this came from Mario, and it just said, Chris and Bo, thank you for your software and training videos. I've been a member since 2015, and you
Wow.
guys have helped change my life. I bought or controlled 20 houses in the last 5 years. Last year, I was able to sell my food business after 15 years, and I live off the cash flow. It all started with you guys. I can't thank you enough. And that
That's
just gives me
awesome.
chills to hear.
He got, that's the thing. Sometimes people just need a little confidence to get going, and not be so scared of everything. Always say you can't control the things around you, but you can control what you do. That's the choice that we all have. It's choose to get up in the morning. I'm going to choose to study. I'm going to choose to call this seller. Jim, you chose to send that letter.
Yeah.
And months down the road, it came back to you. So you made that choice, and we all have that opportunity.
I see a couple of people asking the same question for you, Jim. One from Bill, one from Denise. Same question, really. How did Jim finance the property and the rehab?
So, some of the money I had actually from selling some stock. I had basically the initial 40,000 from stock from a previous employer. The money for the rehab I actually borrowed from a family member, which isn't for everybody, but
be careful with that one.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I was able to borrow the money from a family member for this first one, which really kind of got me going. So I mean that's certainly one way, if you have family members that you're willing to approach and have resources. I mean, the worst they could say no. I mean, okay, then you move on to something else. You never know until you ask. But that's how this particular deal was funded.
Gotcha. Somebody else, another question for you, Jim. How did you find or pick your contractor?
So the contractor in this particular case, I got really lucky on. The gentleman that was my contractor for this, he was actually a friend of a friend. And so I already knew him. I kind of knew what he did. I don't remember if I mentioned, but his business was not only remodeling homes, but he did work specifically in restoring fire damage and water damage and that kind of thing. And so when I saw this place, he immediately came to mind because I'm like, I need someone who I know knows what they're doing. And so, it was a friend of a friend, and I've used him, more than just this occasion. But it was somebody that I already knew.
And contractors are hard to find.
Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I was just say, they really can be. I mean, in the Phoenix area, it's not too bad because Phoenix is a big place. There's a lot of contractors here. But I've talked to other investors that are looking for contractors, and you got to make sure you get the right one. And your local REIA group can be a really good place. Especially if you're working with, or you're talking to other investors who have done rehabs. They have contractors, and other investors may not always have a deal going right now, but their contractors always need work. And so a lot of them are happy to share, as long as you don't try to take them away, don't do that. But, you can find some really good contractors or even direct subcontractors. You get to a point where you may not need someone to manage everything for you. You just need to know who the plumber is and the electrician and that stuff. And, you get to the point you're comfortable doing it yourself. You can save a lot of money knowing the subcontractors directly.
Yeah, that's kind of what Chris and I do. And I remember talking about contractors. They're not only hard to find good ones, they're also hard to deal with sometimes. I remember one time I'm standing there in the driveway. This contractor it was actually on the house I think the gun was in. And we had to kind of show up and fire the contractor. And I remember that contractor looked at Chris in the face and said, "You can't fire me."
I've
Oh
never
man.
had a contractor actually say that. So you do learn things even
He
at
did
this
come back
age.
about a week and a half later and apologize after he was fired, of course, on the spot, mind you. You
I
can't
know I was
fire me.
standing there in the driveway and Bo was standing and a couple of other people. And I was just, this isn't going to work for me. And we're going to have to let you go. And he's just like, you can't fire me. And I'm like, I didn't even know how to respond. I've never actually had anybody say that
Like,
to me
you work
before.
for me.
I know. I was like, remember who actually pays you? But anyways,
Okay, yeah. Denise said that takes a lot of courage. I assume she means asking your family for money. She said that's very commendable. I think the point there is if you got a deal in front of you, you know you can make money, just go find it. I mean, heck, I got American Expresses because I like to have all my points. I just put it on American Express on the rehab and, swipe that card and then I go fly around to vacation. So just find the money. That's the point. Deborah wants to know if is there a way to download your leads to a CVS file? I think she meant CS, yeah, file to or Excel. Yes, Deborah, you can. You can put everything into a marketing campaign. You can, from that campaign, you can order postcards, you can batch skip trace, you can print letters, then you can export it. You are limited to the number that you can export that's included with your plan. Some plans have higher export limits. But you can export as many as you want at a certain point. You just pay per lead after 10,000 or so, 20,000, depending on the plan you're on, but you definitely can export it. Okay. Garland says, we build solid crete homes with the ability to use an existing structure as part of the form system to create the new exterior walls. Is there a place to search and find properties owned by the city or the local governments that they want to get rid of? I didn't really understand that question when I first read it there.
well, the city does have a list of, they'll go in
Yeah.
and condemn, they'll deem them vacant as well. You have to Google that and find, because we have actually searched and we've gotten through to some specific counties, but we actually got a hold of the people that do work for the county to get some of these properties. I want to mention another place that you might want to look, and it actually, Jim, this property that we're talking about had HOA problems. And I remember one of the pre-foreclosure deals that I did, which I usually teach live at an event, that had an HOA problem. And I go down to the HOA to get approval for changing the color of the outside. And the lady there had a business card and she wrote on it and handed it to me and said, I've got a problem with this one too. So you start thinking of not just the city, but HOAs. I'm not going to say it's easy to do and easy to find, or are they even obligated to give you the information? But I think that's just part of our job, is if you're willing to do what others aren't doing and you take a little bit of time and research to do that, you might get lucky once or twice. So.
All right, Mario. Hi, Chris and Bo. If you agree on numbers with a motivated seller and you've got a PSA with about 75 to 80% ARV, but the seller doesn't want to sub to or lease option, what's the best way to, quote, sell it? Would you assign the contract or could you list it on the MLS? Would seasoning of the title be an issue?
Yeah, it could be. I would really want to do more creative financing with that. I used to do what I call an option, which I would put a nice house under contract, and basically it's like wholesaling nice houses. And I did that for years, but a lot of the laws in certain states have really hammered down on those things. So you got to be cautious. But to teach this publicly, I would say you really need to get them to do some type of creative financing, because the last thing you want to do is overpay for something. Right. So I'd really want to push that. Show how much money they would make if they seller financed it. And if I put that on paper, usually when you put it on paper, not just talk about it, that's when they really see it. But I would really stick with that, or I'd follow back up in 30 days and see if they've changed their mind.
All right, looks like we got one more question from Denise. She says, I have REI Pro and I absolutely love it. Any suggestions on how to profit from two mortgages on the home, the first of which is in foreclosure?
Well, without seeing the numbers on the property, I mean, you could wholesale the pre-foreclosure depending on where the numbers lie. I'd want to get the payoff statement. What are the back payments? I'd want to verify that the second mortgage is even being paid at this point. So there's probably a lot of, you need to call the owner. And those are the questions that I'd be asking.
Yeah, she actually put in
just to
here
see.
some of the numbers, and I think it's going to be key to find out the back payments and stuff. She said it's sellers have already vacated the home. No one wants to pay more than what the first mortgage is at, which is around $90,000. Second mortgage is at 28, and the ARV is about 140.
The
So it may
problem
depend
with
on the condition of this property too, rehab on it.
yeah, or a
Back
potential
payments.
short sale. But the problem is the second lien holder is going to, if the first lien holder goes in foreclosure, the second's going to be out.
Right.
So I would almost want to communicate with the banks. Think of a short sale. A short sale might be, a solution for everyone, but it all, again, depends on where the numbers are going to be. Condition of the property, how much rehab cost it's going to be, what's the total debt on the properties or the property. And then the last but not least is the bank even willing to work with you? So it sounds like an iffy deal based on those basic numbers you just gave me.
Gotcha.
All right. Is that it?
That is it for tonight. So thanks, Jim, for sharing this story. I know everybody is definitely, get a learning experience out of what you went through.
Of course. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah. And I think, just even to bring awareness to people, Bo, that, and that was my whole point of this training, was to bring awareness to what happens if I do buy a house and it has all these illegal items in it. Depending on the level of that, there are certain things that you have to do, but it happens everywhere. And if you're in this business long enough, I can promise you're going to run into one. So, we ran into two back to back. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And again, we'll have this recorded, go back into REI Pro. We definitely, love for you to go back through it. Always go through everything you learn at least 3 times, because you always pick up something different each time. So I'll also have this on our YouTube channel as well. So you can go back and play that. And thanks for everyone participating. I think that's what makes all this work, and asking those questions as well. So have a great week. Take care, and we'll see you next time.